Good afternoon, 12:30 on a Thursday morning here in the UK. And I'm guessing by your decor that you're in Malta at the
Uh,
moment.
yes,
Ah, yes.
uh, it's we're having the first rain of the year actually as we
Oh,
speak.
really?
So yeah, it's much
In
needed
November?
in November. Yeah, but
Wow.
it's very refreshing, clean air.
Right. Right.
Um, everyone's delighted with it, apart from the tourists.
Okay. But yes, yes, I can imagine leaving UK for a sunny Malta and it isn't.
That's right. But
Yes. So I'm delighted to be joined today by AJ Aberford. Would you like to be called AJ or Tony?
I
Tony.
think it's Tony. I write as
Tony.
Aidan Aberford,
Yeah.
but my name is Tony
Okay.
Garland.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, we'll go with that. So we're talking about you and your crime series, and we always start at the beginning. And can you remember when you started writing, and then the first thing, how you got into writing, and the first thing, if you can remember, that you wrote way back?
No, oh, I can't go that far back. I think, like many people, I started writing during lockdown. I mean, I've
Okay.
always been an avid reader, and I did sort of a crazy qualification, an A level in medieval English. So the language has always really sort of appealed to me.
Mm.
But during lockdown, I live in Malta, but I have a house back in the UK in Yorkshire. And
Mm.
unfortunately, Dad was very, very sick, so I was commuting backwards and forwards,
Mm.
spending lots of time on aeroplanes, but also 2 weeks lockdown in Malta and 2 week quarantine in the UK. So I had time on my hands, and there was a friend of mine who wrote a book which I read, and I thought, oh, that's quite good. So to fill the time,
Quick plug for friend. Quick plug for
it's
friend.
a guy called Martin Sowery, and he's available on
Okay.
Amazon. He doesn't promote his work that much, but his books
Mm.
are pretty good.
Okay.
So I thought, if Martin can do it, I can do it. So Malta is a very, very interesting place to live. The plot lines I just take from the headlines of what goes on in Malta.
Mm.
Um, the southern Mediterranean, as you know, is the home of organized crime, migrant smuggling, all sorts of uh, uh, terrible activities, gambling, money laundering, and a lot of it does come through Malta.
Okay.
So one of the reasons I call myself AJ Aberford was that the a very brave blogger, Daphne Caruana Galizia, was actually murdered for revealing a lot of the political connections into the criminal activities and tracked it all the way back to the government. So I thought
Mm.
I'd try and avoid a car bomb and write under a pen name. But
Right.
unfortunately, my publishers chose to put my photograph on the back of the book.
Ah,
So
right.
that was that planned
Not so anonymous. No.
Not so anonymous at all, no. But
No.
it's okay. A lot of my stories do revolve around the goings on in Malta. The themes are island life,
Mm.
family, organized crime, and Malta's a rich repository. So the
Mm.
idea for the books came from my real life experiences here on the island.
Well, they say write what you know, but you are also covered by the lovely paragraph in the copyright on the copyright page that says any resemblance to people alive or dead is purely coincidental.
Yes, exactly. And please don't come after me. I mean, the problem with
Yeah.
Malta again is that I think something like 90% of the population have 50 names. So when I first started writing, my hero, George Zammit, was called George Borge. It turned out that George Borge was the transport minister.
Ah,
And
okay.
now I write, the hero or the anti-hero, as George is George
Mm.
Zammit, as they pronounce it. It turns out that he is the Minister of the Environment. So these names
Ah,
keep popping up. So it's a very real issue.
local. Yeah.
Um, and everybody thinks it's about them. And I have to sort of persuade numerous people that no, it's not about you. It's just
Yeah.
happens that way.
That's the thing. I go to a lot of literary festivals, and invariably the authors on the panel get asked, do your friends read the books and are convinced that they are a particular character? But we tend to take snippets, don't we, from the fact that he speaks a certain way or she walks a certain way, or it's unless you are purposely dedicating a character to somebody we tend to pick bits and pieces from
I think that's
life.
true. I mean, I can honestly say that all bar one of the characters in the books are people who've just come to me, and I'm not really modeling them on anybody in particular, but there is one character, and I can't say too much, otherwise he or she may pick it up who it is.
Okay.
And she's not a very nice character either, but is very much modelled on someone who I do know, and I just
Mm,
smile every time I write a scene with her in it. I've given it
yeah.
away.
Okay. Oh, well, that's 50% of the population. I think you're fairly safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it
Well,
does
I
make me like wondering what she would think if she sort of, if she ever read the book and clicked.
right. Well, I lived in Northamptonshire, Northampton actually for 31 years, up until a couple of years ago. Moved back down to Buckinghamshire. And my next door neighbour was an unsavoury character, and he owned the local shop and didn't like any of his neighbours and didn't like women particularly. So kind of alienated, well, didn't alienate because he was the local shop. And so every character I who got bumped off was sort of modelled on him. And it's
Yeah.
therapeutic, isn't it?
Well, yeah,
Especially if they have a grisly death.
I think, you can actually expand it. And we had an occasion where Janet's, my wife's mother, who's about 90, came over when some of her friends, she's Italian, and some of her friends from Italy came over. We're not that far away. And we decided to take them out to cocktails. And we went to a very, very plush hotel and had the most terrible cocktails. They were badly mixed. They weren't cold. The
Right,
glasses were dirty. It was such a disappointment. And the
right.
ladies all got dressed up and were so excited. So now I
Oh,
always make a point of slagging off this hotel in every book that I write.
yeah.
When someone says, "Shall we go out for a drink?" I say, "For God's sake, don't go to Hotel X. The cocktails are dreadful."
Oh.
So there's a few
Well,
things like you
I must
can't
say
do it.
the which one is it? This one up here. I usually go with this, but it's yes, that one there, the serial data. Her task is to date 31 men in 31 days. So she goes to different locations around Northampton. One of which used to be a very grotty bar and hotel called the Aviator, which was based on the edge of a, as you can imagine,
Yeah,
an airfield. And at the time when I first wrote it or came up with the idea, I had visited it, but not for some years. And I thought, oh, I better. I'm not giving it very good light, so I'd better go back and just see if it's still grotty. And it had loads of money invested in it, and it was beautiful. So I had to change it before it was published.
yeah. I
So
mean,
yeah, you have to be careful using real
well,
places.
I have similar stories. George, my hero, sort of travels the southern Mediterranean, and as a policeman, he gets thrust into various conundrums and challenges around the Mediterranean basement, Mediterranean basin. Sorry, excuse me. And on one of them, he went to Mount Etna on a kidnap, and
Yes.
the Camorra had kidnapped his boss's niece, and he was sent to sort it all out. So he goes to Mount Etna and he meets a woman there, and she figures in the story, and she tells him how she drives from point A on the north of Etna to get a hair
Mm.
done in Catania, which is on the south side of Etna. And I thought this was all very clever, and that's where she lived. When I got there, I realised it was a 3 hour drive from where I said that she lived to Catania, and no woman
Right.
was going to be driving 3 hours there and 3 hours back to get a hair done.
No.
And there was another instance in Istanbul where one of the characters has a big meeting in a park on the outskirts of Istanbul. And my wife and I were there, and we said, well, let's go and have a look at Pierlotti Park and just sort of check it out. So we went there, and we found out that Pierlotti Park was in fact a graveyard,
Oh
with
wow.
food. So luckily I managed to go back and get
Yes.
changed
Very.
before the book went out. But I
It's a good
just
reason. It's a good reason to have research trips and
I mean, I
enjoy
do an
time
awful lot
somewhere else.
on Google Earth, and Google Earth seems to
Yeah.
work very, very well.
Yeah.
And you can get a real feel for a place and zoom in and sort of work stuff
Mm,
out.
mm.
Much as I'd like to spend my life traveling around the Mediterranean countries, the Syrian refugee camps, which feature in book 5, probably not
Mm.
for me.
No.
And there's some other instances where I write about places I'd rather not go, and you have to rely on best that you can photographs,
Mm,
Google Maps, study
yeah.
a lot of maps, and
Mm.
to check distances, but obviously not the distances between places in Randazzo and hairdressers in Catania.
Lesson learned, because there'll always be somebody who reads the book and will know
Okay.
more than you know. So
Yeah.
do you write full time now?
Um, I spend a lot of time writing. It's not, I don't make an income. I've retired and, I've got sort of pensions and independent means, so I don't need to sell books, but I need something to do. So I kind of, I did have a couple of businesses which I sold for many years, 20 years really. I had a brewery in Yorkshire, which even though I lived in Malta, took a lot of my time. I sold that this year. So
Okay.
now I've kind of got nothing really. And I tend to sort of write early in the morning, through to about lunchtime. In the afternoon, I do other stuff. And then I come back in the early evening and spend about an hour editing. Um, and that tends to be how things work out um, when I'm in the middle of it. But, when you're waiting for an editor to get back to you or you're waiting for something to happen, obviously the time I spend writing is probably less. But I sit down every day and do something.
Mm.
Uh, my wife Janet does social media and she helps promote and she does a lot
Okay.
of proofing and she's got an eagle eye and she's very much a completer finisher.
That's
I'm,
handy.
I'm a
My
pantser.
I'm a yes. Well, I started off as a pantser, and I find the more I write, the more I become a plantser. So I make some notes, and then a lot of it is just organic, and it appears, and I change things. But I find I stop more if I don't have any idea of where it's going. And I'm very much a write a bit and then, oh, I've got an idea for a bit more and write a bit. I'm not
Yeah,
particularly linear. But then I've got the A's, the M's, and the Z's to then fill in the gaps in between.
the A, the M's, and the Z's.
Well, so rather than A to Z, I've got bits in
Right. Yeah.
between
Okay.
to then fill it
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
mentioned editing, and you're very lucky. Yes, my husband is an engineer, so he's very good DIY, very good hands-on, but not so much with computing, so and marketing. So sadly, in his retirement, I think unless I retrain him, I think I won't, but he won't be helping me in that respect. But he
Well, I
does
think
listen. He listens to some of the things I read out, and he nods. And he got quite emotional. I wrote a story. I've got an option called Your Unique Story, where I write short stories for people.
right. Oh, yeah,
And
that's all.
the local schools have raffle prizes, so I give them vouchers for these short stories. And I wrote one the other day for a 7-year-old, and apparently she wants to grow up to be a vet, and I just put her in as wanting to be a vet when she grew up, which I didn't know about, and she was delighted. And I before I sent it off, I read the story to Tim, and he got quite emotional because it was a very sweet story.
Nice.
So that
Nice.
was lovely. But he reads science fiction, and I don't write science fiction, so he's no help on that score either.
Well, there you go. I mean, Janet,
Yes.
we've always done things together. She was a director of the brewery, and
Mm.
we've been involved in various sort of things which we complement each other. She's very much on the
Yeah.
marketing. That's what she did in her professional life.
Right.
So I think
Always
from
handy.
sort of taking baby steps. Well, if you can say publishing 6 books is baby steps. I think we're going to try and make it more of a full-time thing. Janet's going to commit more to learning the evil ways of book marketing and the trying to crack the Amazon algorithm and beat Facebook ads
Yes.
and all
Yes.
that
Well,
stuff.
yeah, Facebook ads is high on my list of things to get to know. So I do Amazon ads, and I'm still not so much learning, but I'm not very good at going into it every single morning and setting up my negative targets and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a part-time job in itself.
Well, we'll keep that. That'll keep us busy over the winter, I think.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I
But
think
you
to answer your
clearly you clearly enjoy it, and she clearly enjoys helping you, which
yeah.
is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's good.
Yeah.
It's been previous careers. It's been a new step, and as
Mm.
into retirement, to pick it up, and um, it takes you to different places. You meet different people.
Mm.
Um, it keeps your mind. You're always alert and combing the papers and
Mm.
looking for plot lines.
It
It's
isn't having a
I'm
notebook with you, so jot them down.
I'm an avid reader of all published journals. Yes,
Right, right. So you mentioned the editing process. I will mention before I forget that half my in-laws are from Yorkshire, so they've
right.
probably drunk your beer, and they're big beer drinkers. So they probably drunk your beer at
We'll have yes, yes.
Rotherham United when they go up there to see them and so
Right.
on.
Good.
So
Good.
So you mentioned editing. Obviously, you've got your Janet helps you with your editing. How do you find it when you get it back from the publisher? Are you quite
Well,
okay with taking
yeah,
external
I've got a
criticism?
professional editor as well. So I work with a lady called Lynn Curtis. I don't know whether you know Lynn at all, but she's been around
Don't
for
know.
a long time, and
Okay.
she helped me from the very first time I sent her a book, and she sent it back to me and said,
Mm,
this is not going to do,
right.
and she's very, very good, and very sort of caustic in her comments, but brutal with the truth, which is what you need. And I think
Yes.
if you're paying someone for advice, you take it,
Mm.
so
Yeah, I'd
very,
say I'm firm but fair.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, lots of ticks and smiley faces and lots of buts. This is really, I really like this, but yeah.
Yes, she'll say something. This is good, well done. But is it still Wednesday?
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah, I've
things.
got one on a book I'm working at the moment where one character said she was due to go and start something on a Friday, and then two chapters later it's a Wednesday and she's there. So it's bits
Yeah,
and pieces like that.
I mean,
Everybody needs a second viewpoint.
it is. I mean, that's on the structural basis. It's good to have that sort of that market check on things like cultural appropriation and the way you
Mm,
treat same-sex relationships and all this sort of this very sort of dangerous ground you can stray onto, particularly if you are a late middle-aged, early old age, sort
right.
of chap, and you've got to watch it very, very carefully. So she's very sensitive about that and will steer me, either away or towards, certain passages or advise
Mm,
how to handle
mm,
certain situations. So I appreciate that, and then obviously it gets down into the detail of the copy edit and the line edit. Then I just accept.
yeah. Yeah.
And Janet does
That's what I like to hear from an editing client. That's what I like to hear. Um, do your I can stray off slightly. Obviously you live on a relatively small island. How have the police? Because you mentioned earlier on about having to change things for certain aspects. Do you have help from the how have your local police force taken your books?
Well,
Do they help or
I assiduously avoid them.
okay?
No, it's in fairness, they're not police procedurals. They don't rely a great deal on the sort of the comings and goings of the justice system.
Mm,
I mean, George is, he's a bit of an anti-hero. He's overweight. He's always got a pasty in his hand. He sort of stumbles from sort of one chaotic situation to another.
my
Um,
kind of man.
exactly. He's got an overbearing wife, a sort of a misbehaving daughter, and the only straight one in the family. I mean, straight as in moral compass straight,
Yeah, yeah.
son who has become a
Right.
police sergeant. And as the
Oh,
books progress, it has been a linear thing. George has got older,
mm,
because he stumbles into successes every time he's been promoted. And he's
right.
gone from lowly inspector and he's now an assistant commissioner.
Mm,
But the final book, the Carl Horn Revolution, and that's the sort of the Auberge Castile was where the Italian knights used to hang out in the 16th century, but it's now the
mm.
office of the Prime Minister. And if you look, you can just see a Russian flag flying on top.
Ah,
So it's a bit of a country takeover thing. And we think of, there's all those books, sort of Robert Harris's Fatherland, that sort of stuff.
mm,
What would have
mm,
happened had the Germans won the war and the Germans were in power?
right.
And it sort of contemplates a situation where Malta strays under the influence of a big power who comes in. And because Malta's not in NATO, it's in the EU,
Mm,
its constitution has it as being non-aligned. Therefore, it neither gives aid nor takes aid from any other sort of government on a military level.
mm,
It is quite exposed. Um, and then you do get Russian ships that refuel out on the borders of Malta's territorial waters and things like
mm,
this. And it's got a prime position between Italy and North Africa. I mean, it had a major role to play in the Second World War. And obviously, it was where the Ottomans stormed it in 1565 to try and get a foothold to get to Sicily, from Sicily to get to Italy, to get to Rome. So it
mm,
was, it was the borders of the Christian world when it rubbed up against the Islamic world. So it's a strategic place, and this book does contemplate corrupt politicians being blackmailed to let
Right.
the Russians in. So
Oh,
that is the office that goes straight to the office of the Prime Minister. And the car horn revolution is the way in which the Maltese choose to protest or celebrate anything. They just put their hands on their car horns.
right.
So, as you had in the Arab Spring, there was all these riots with people banging their car horns, and that
Yeah.
features the
Yeah.
book. So,
Okay.
in terms of something which has the potential to upset people, I suppose you could say this is right on, but it's done in a humorous way.
Mm.
It's been carefully done to avoid any sort of reference, and
And it's
even
fiction.
and it of course it's fiction,
Yes,
but
absolutely. Yes. It's easy for some to forget.
it's only just the jobs. So I don't know how it's going to be, how it's going to go down. I've trailed it quite broadly amongst my Maltese friends, all of whom are, I suppose, probably um, on the right rather than on the left in Maltese politics because it's the
Mm.
Labour Party that's in government
Okay.
who have been scandalised over the past 6 or 7 years.
Right.
Um, but most people sort of have thought that the criticism, or not the criticism, the proposition is a fair proposition.
Mm.
And although it's far-fetched, it's not totally ridiculous.
Mm.
And I go into the politics of the EU and the constitution of the EU and this sort of thing to see to try and guess what the reaction might be to such a
Yeah.
situation. But
That's
there
the
we are.
thing. It's got to be all fiction has got to be believable.
Yeah,
It's believable things happening to people we've made up. Now
exactly.
you mentioned earlier on about George progressing and getting older, and his son coming in. So do you think when you get to a point where you can't do anything more with George, that his son might take over your books?
Well, I think it's the whole family have progressed. Gina, the daughter's got married. She got a boyfriend. Then book two, she got engaged. Book three,
Mm.
she got married. Book four, she had a baby. Book five,
Okay.
she's so this. Everything has progressed. Some of
Yeah.
the characters have got old and got sick, and have passed away. Others have appeared. You always kill the ones you love. So book six was a bit of a slaughterhouse at the end, I'm afraid.
Right.
But it's been left hanging, but I'm going to give them a rest for a while. I think they've had a hard enough time, the Zammit family. So
Mm.
I've done six now, and it seems like a good place to break the series. I'm not saying I'll ever go
Okay.
back to it, and I have got
Yeah.
some ideas about how I would come back to it. And as you say, um, George's son Denzel is well placed to pick up the heroics of his father, and his father can always be pottering around in the background interfering.
Right.
But I want to do some other
As
stuff now.
they
I,
do. Yeah.
try,
Yeah.
try, try, try my hand at something else, totally different.
Okay. Can you tell us what that is to a point?
To a point, it is probably mystery stroke supernatural genre.
Okay.
It's set in Yorkshire, which is obviously where I live. I know Yorkshire. It sort of majors on the landscape. It's partly historical. There's historical echoes into a current day mystery. If you think Pendle Hill, Pendle Witches, this sort of stuff, Catholic recusant priests, and a featured a group of women. So rather than having what was quite a male-dominated series in some ways, I mean, I'm just trying to. This is a sort of a cover, bullets in the
Yes,
sand.
they're fabulous, aren't they?
Well,
Yeah.
it's a bit macho. It doesn't
Okay.
really sort of do the contents sort of justice.
Right.
And I wanted to write for, a sort of something slightly more sensitive, something slightly less kind of bullets, guns, sort of ISIS, smuggling crime. So
Sure.
something more, but not a cozy. It's wrong to say it's a cozy because
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of supernatural and ghosty stuff going on in there, a bit
Mm.
of witchcraft, and just a tale. It's a 3-book series. I've done 2. I want to get the third done, get all the story right, have the 3
Mm.
ready to go. And obviously, at the minute, I'm just going through the process of looking at publishers. Fine.
Sure.
Obviously,
And
who get
will
who
that
put
be under a different name? Because obviously people are used to you for this particular type of book.
I know it's hard really because you spend a lot of time building up 5,000 Twitter followers and 1,000
Yep.
Facebook friends, and then you dump them
Yeah.
all to
Yeah.
start again. I mean, my wife
Yeah.
Janet, who does the socials, was horrified at the thought.
Right.
But
I'm the same. My two women's fiction up there, they're Rachel Kavanagh. And so on the front, they're Rachel Kavanagh. On Amazon, they are Rachel Kavanagh, but then they've also got my name tagged to it. And I have a Rachel Kavanagh profile on Twitter and Facebook. But so when I post on Facebook, I share it to my page and to Rachel Kavanagh. But even so, it's kind of, and I can do the Amazon advertising to those books as well.
Yes, yes.
Um, but yes, I think unless people know that, so my newsletters, I would, for the women's fiction, they would know that it's me, but that I use the name Rachel Kavanagh. So it's
I mean, I've
kind of
seen,
finding a balance really between completely new
yeah.
and completely old.
I mean, you can signal on the cover, what the book is, and I
Mm,
think a lot of the books, the sort of the kind of witchy type are all green covers with belladonna and deadly nightshade sort of up around the side and a little
mm.
picture framed in the middle. And I see it like that. So I think people picking that up would think, it doesn't look like Malta. What's he up to
Yes,
now? So
exactly. Yes, you go because people do judge by a book by its cover,
so I
regardless of what people say, especially when it's an inch high.
Yeah, quite. And I think,
Yeah.
and it would say on the front, the tagline would be something about, it's Aunt Lily is the woman who's the center of the story. She's the main character, the Aunt Lily Yorkshire Mysteries, book one.
Mm,
So it
mm,
would be positioned in Yorkshire. It would have a completely different sort of feel to
mm,
the cover. So I might try and get away with using my own name,
mm.
my own, well,
I think
AJ.
it's yes, I think it's a good idea, especially because you're there as AJ, which is gender
Neutral.
non-specific,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's why I'm Morgan Bailey because I could be male. In fact, I had an email. I've got some things on for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and I got a hey buddy from somebody this morning because my profile picture is a caricature that somebody did for my husband and I at our wedding. And so it's not clear whether I'm
Yeah.
male or female, which is sometimes not a bad thing.
Well, that was part of the thing, but I mean,
Mm,
if I were to start again, I would have been more careful with how I designed the covers.
okay.
And I think that the covers are, even despite the, as you'd say, the neutrality of the name AJ,
Mm,
I think they are decidedly, they're decidedly male. They're a little too much for my liking.
mm,
I would have been a little bit more thoughtful. I mean,
right.
the later books are not. The later books, I've tried to sort of tone it down a little bit. But
Mm.
yeah, I think I probably learned a lesson from it. I mean, everybody
We do, don't we? I'm still learning.
yeah,
39 books on, I'm still learning.
everybody says not the sort of book I would normally pick up, but you
But
know,
yes, exactly. Anyway, well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much. And hopefully chat again in the next few weeks with an audience where we'll start with book one and keep going
I'm good and ready for it.
until we run out of books. So,
Yeah, I'm ready to
so
go.
super.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you very
Tony.
much.
Okay, bye bye.